In this lesson, we'll begin applying some formulas and design options to our bookshelf component. All right, so let's start off with our overall component here. We'll start adding some formulas, and then we'll get a feel of how this works, and then we can start working with all these subcomponents. So go ahead and open up or expand out this window. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and apply a value for my material thickness. I know overall for this particular bookshelf, everything is going to be my material thickness. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to type in a value, actually, down to material thickness, excuse me. I'm going to type in the value I want it to be. In our case, I'm going to say 0.75 inches. Hit enter. And what that'll do is it lets me know that I can actually take this and make any of these values equal to that, if that's what I wanted to do. So we're going to do the same thing here with some of our values. So I'm going to plug in my initial value for what we have for our depth. So in our case here, I want to say, double click on it, we want to say depth. I want to say 12 inches, right? And then for our height, I want to say 60 inches. And again, we could either notate this as when we start working with drop-down lists and all that, as how I have it here, 12 inches or 1 foot. But the key is when we're plugging in information for you to know that what we're typing in, SketchUp is interpreting as inches. So keep that in mind as you're plugging this in. So for my height, I'm not going to put 5 feet. I'm actually going to put in 60 inches. And for the width on this one, oh, there we go, 60 inches. And hit tab so it accepts. So then right here for the width, another 60 inches. So 60 inches, tab. So we have pretty much everything we need as far as our initial setup. Now the neat thing about doing this, I mentioned something about drop down and lists and options. You'll notice this little icon here. So go ahead and go to your cabinet depth here. And then you see this little details button. Go ahead and click on that. So what that does is it brings up the ability to create those options I mentioned. We already have parameters in place, but now we want the end user who's using this to be able to select from a list when they're creating this or when they're placing this, so that they don't have to create this and copy and play around with scaling and all that. They can simply go to a list. And here's how we do it. So we have our display rule. So right now it's set to users cannot see this attribute. Go to that drop down and go to users can select from a list. And that's going to enable us to create all the information we need. So list option, just the name, list value, the actual distance. So go to add option. So our first one we already have in place. So I'm going to say 12. You could say 1 foot or 12 inches. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to say 12 inches. Hit tab. It'll automatically take you to the value. Since I used inches and since I used 12, it's automatically going to appear. Hit tab again and it'll accept it. Now had I not hit inches when I placed it here, it'll bring up exactly what I need to hit here. So keep that in mind. Remember, we're adding inches and not feet. So the other option, you remember from our measurements in our initial setup, we had 1 foot 6 inches. So we'll say 1 foot 6 inches. I'm going to go ahead and tab to accept that and then tab again. And you see it's brought it up to 18 inches. See how that worked? So now our last dimension or our last depth was 2 feet. So I'm going to say 24 inches, tab and tab. And perfect. So I'm going to hit tab one more time. So now we have our 3 elements to select from as far as our depth is concerned. So now go ahead and click apply. And now what I want you to do is right click on your element or your component there. This time we're going to go to options. It's going to open up your other window. So you see what we just created? Our cabinet depth category. And we also created these elements. Pretty cool, right? Now, it's really not going to do any behaviors just yet. It's just going to bring up these options. So I'll show you how to kind of get the behaviors going. So you see how it worked? Plug in our attributes, come here to our details window, tell SketchUp you want this to be options, and now you can access them as options in another window. So now we're going to start working with some formulas. So now what I want to do is when we're thinking about sizing, we want this, or basically want whatever we have here to equal that. So in our case here, our depth, we know that our depth is going to be the green axis. So for green axis, I'm going to say cabinet depth. So I'm going to go to my green axis here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the inside, double click again, highlight it, and type in equals. And I want you to type in cabinet depth, exactly how it looks in there. So say cabinet capital D, depth. Type in tab, and it should accept your formula. So now what we can do is we can go back to our options. Check this out. So I'm going to go right-click on our element, dynamic components, go to options. Now, let's see what happens with our depth. If I go to 1'6", you see how that jumped? We actually can control the depth of our bookcase now. Pretty neat, right? So I can go back to my 24 inches. Check that out. Pretty cool. And I can bring it back down to its regular size. So that's how we could take care of that particular element for this. So, and let's go ahead and finish out the rest of these. So we know we took care of our depth, right? So now let's do the same thing for our height. So let's come over here to our cabinet height, click on your details box, switch from users can choose from a list, and now we're going to say cabinet height. And now you know we only have 2, so I'm going to do 5 feet, tab. Now I'm not going to hit tab because remember I want it to be inches. So really what I could have did to be consistent is I can say 60 here. 60 inches, tab, tab. There you go, right? So we want 10 feet here, which is 120. So we'll say 120 inches, tab, tab. That'll take care of that value. I'll tab it one more time just to get these visible. Click apply. And now I'm going to make sure that whatever my height, in this case, the blue axis, I want those to be equal. So I'm going to come here, double click on it, type in equals cabinet height. Exactly how it looks, right? Hit tab to accept it. And we know we're in good shape because we didn't see any red lettering or any hashtag patterns appear up here. So now we're in good shape. And we know that we've already played around with some parameters because these are now in bold. These are kind of grayed out. So these are just values that are simply placed in there. So last but not least, let's knock out the last one we got to work with in our case, which is probably the cabinet width. So go ahead and click on that, double click, highlight, equals exactly how, or actually, I'm sorry. Should be doing it to the red axis. There we go. And watch, you'll notice that 60 will go from a grayed out value to a dark value. That lets us know that there's a formula applied to this already, or constraint. So we'll go ahead and hit equal, and we want this one to be my cabinet width. And I'm going to show you what happens if you don't type in the right word. So I'm not going to capitalize my W. So I'm just going to go width, right? I'll hit tab, and we get this, nope. We get this weird message. Oh, let me get out of here real quick. Let's say I accidentally typed in a V instead of the W. So we'll say, we'll misspell it. I think that'll show it a little bit better. So now I'll hit tab, and that's that error message I was telling you. You get this little hashtag, and it tells you, hey, there's a spelling error in here. So if that ever happens, just go back and double click on it, see where you messed up. You can always go back and fix it. It's just nice to have that error message. So again, that was width, so W-I-D-T-H. Tab to accept. The error message is gone. These are all in black. I know constraints are applied. If I hit my F of X, I can see my formulas exposed. I can close that to kind of hide them out again. Now we can come back to our model. Right click, access our options. And I always like to kind of test as I go here. So we're going to go back to height. So let's flip the height here, apply, and it should affect our height. And it did, like so. So again, click on it, and we'll mess with it here. And we'll go back to 60. So there we go. So in the next lesson, we're going to start working with a few more, and we're going to apply some parameters to our bookshelf system, and even some of our sides and pieces here. So I'll meet you in the next lesson while we start working with the subcomponents.